fixing social media is a key piece of safely deploying AI in society right now, and currently we're not up to the task. So just a couple years ago, TikTok was not on the map domestically in the United States, right? It was not like a big platform. They have a highly addictive algorithm, like one of the best algorithms in the world for keeping your attention on site, right? So if Facebook and Twitter/X decided not to use a highly addictive algorithm, then they lose market share right away, right, to their competitor, TikTok or Facebook. And attention is zero-sum. We only have a limited amount of it during the day. And the market incentives for these companies are tremendous.
Next up is Tobias Rose-Stockwell, who's looked at what Jaron Lanier was also meant to be speaking about, but which is about how society has been changed by social media and the internet economy. His book was so evocatively titled that we've literally stolen it for this session as well. It's called The Outrage Machine. And Tobias has written a book which actually maps the arc of how societies, our biology, our chemistry, our relationships with each other have been impacted and changed by the internet economy. And he does it with a lot of gentleness, without polarization, but it is very, very insightful. And so to understand what are these unseen forces which we are so willingly participating in, which is changing us without our knowledge, but with our participation, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tobias Rose-Stockwell on stage.
Of lynchings on the basis of fake news and rumors.
2 innocent women from the Cookizo community being paraded naked and subjected to brutal assault. Fake news and rumors played a dark and destructive role.
The US-based journalist who posed a question regarding minorities is being attacked and harassed online.
They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
A 15-year-old girl committed suicide, and it appears that she was being bullied online.
A comedian who was being trolled and issued rape threats.
We arrested 23 people for circulating fake and hateful messages.
4 weeks, there have been 37 of these fake news and mob attacks.
Hi.
Thank you for being here, Tobias.
Thanks. Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Tobias, as I said, we've been kind of weaving between the wonderful sort of possibilities that the internet economy, social media companies, all of that have enabled, and then looking at the underlayer of that. And you've written this, we've stolen your book title, and I would have even, the second part of his book title is How the Internet Broke our Brains and Destroyed Our Democracy. So that's a really strong, evocative title, Tobias. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes just deciphering that with you.
Great.
The interesting thing is that you put a kind of cut-off line. There's an AD and a BC involved here. And you say that it's around 2011 when a very innocuous thing like a like button and a notification button came into these technologies. And that's literally much the watershed the before and after. So can you explain that phenomenon to us?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me. This conference has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed the breadth of the conversation. Such an ambitious thing you've done here, and really impressive, so thank you. In 2009, we had social media, but it wasn't the social media that we have today. We had Facebook, we had Twitter, and they were fairly innocuous versions of the tools that we think of today. And there was a set of 3 different features that were launched on these platforms at different times. And between these 3 features, it fundamentally upgraded the type of information, emotional information, that we could spread on these platforms, and the speed at which that information spread. So the features are the like button, right, which is the ability to just like a post. We all like the like button. The algorithmic feed, and the one-click share, the ability to press a single button and share to your entire audience, your entire group of friends. And between them, each on their surface were actually great for developers, and they were very good for us as users. So they made a lot of sense. But when taken to an extreme, they actually fundamentally shifted the type of information ecosystem that we live in and turned it into a more outrageous, problematic, conspiracy-laden, and dangerous place. Yeah.
So can you break that down a little bit more?
Sure.
So you're saying that the like button, they seemed innocuous, but they were, what were they really doing? And and earlier Jaren said, or many people have said, that it's not that the companies want to be evil or see themselves as evil, and that's fine. Let's take that as the baseline.
Yeah.
But there are whistleblowers like Tristan Harris, who's a friend of yours, who actually published a paper or put out a report, while he
at
was
Google. Yeah, while he was at Google.
Where he said that what we are doing is really wrong because it is literally kidnapping people's attention. There are others who said that there was an awareness that you were playing with the chemistry of our brains, literally doing something which scientifically is going to accelerate the dopamine loops, so it's like literally addictive, that this was conscious knowledge and it was still done,
Yeah.
So again, I would say that, can you break that down for us further?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I don't think that it was a inherent nefarious and conscious effort to change human behavior at scale. A lot of these designers and developers, they were really just trying to make products that worked for people, right? That people responded to. The like button, for instance, Justin Rosenstein, he was the creator of like button. He originally said, I wanted to make positivity the path of least resistance online, right? So you assume that's great, like more positivity, it's easier to up-level content. You can see, as a developer, I can see what you really like, as opposed to what you're actually just watching online. So it's a better signal, right? But for something like the like button, we ended up basically training ourselves and each other with this thing. So if you go back to B.F. Skinner, a famous psychologist in the better part of last century, he built this box that he put rats and pigeons in, and he would flash a light, and there'd be a button for the rat or the pigeon to press when the light flashed. And it turned out if you could train essentially one of these pigeons to become obsessed with the process of pressing a button when the light flashed to get a food pellet. But the key to that was a sense of randomness, right? So you need to get some intermittent variable reward from that particular process of getting a flashing light. Sometimes you get the response. Sometimes you get the food pellet. Sometimes you don't. And that randomness is one of the things that has trained us to become obsessed with. When we post online, am I going to get the likes? Am I going to get the shares and the follows? I'm not sure. So the visibility of these metrics and the gamification of these metrics have actually kind of colonized our lives as opposed to us using these platforms. The platforms are kind of using us instead now, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's a really powerful thing you just said, Tobias. That's almost like an abusive relationship. Somebody said that why do you stay in, someone in the audience had said, why do you stay in an abusive relationship?
Right.
It's that addictive thing of what will I get? Will I get a good response or will I get a brutal response? And that's part of that dynamic of what keeps you, or you said earlier, it's like the gambling. It's the same thing that happens when you're gambling. You don't know what's going to come at you. So, I mean, you're saying that they were not aware that you use randomized reward, like they've designed a randomized reward. So you keep posting because you don't know that anxiety, the mental health statistics that, Dr. Vivek Murthy, who's the Surgeon Chief of America, has been warning about this, saying that the mental health situation of children across the world is being impacted by social media because of this gamification, this reward addiction. You don't know how you'll get rewarded. You're telling me that this has been designed with this knowledge, but it's not.
Look, I'm not here to defend these companies. I wrote a whole book about.
But what I'm trying to say is that when you were researching this book, is there a consciousness of it? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think there was awareness, but it was too late. Honestly, it was too late. These mechanics had been deployed and they've been used at scale, and it's very difficult to roll them back now. There are certain features that have been put out to try to kind of blunt or dull some of the harms from these tools. And that's the history of technology, really, right? Is that we do something, it works really well, almost too well, and there's a whole bunch of unforeseen externalities and harms that come to us from that technology. And you look back at the history of every media technology, from the printing press to the telegraph to the radio to the television, we have this explosion of unintended consequences that is really disruptive for society. And then we figure out how to manage those outcomes in a positive way, right? And I think we're in that particular phase right now with social media, starting to really understand what the primary harms are and the ways that we can mitigate them largely. The danger is, of course, that if we wait too long and if we don't move fast enough, it's possible it hollows out the entire system and that democracies fail in the process. So I do think this is one of the biggest tests to democracy that we've had as a result of these social tools, which again feel very innocuous on the surface, but fundamentally have really disrupted society. Yeah.
These are some pretty powerful things you're saying in the most gentle and reasonable way, Tobias, that democracy could fail, our societies could fail, our mental health is impacted. But I'm interested, I just wanted to zero in, because you researched this book and you've had access, you know this community, that when you said that it's too late to turn it back, I think a lot of the one big stream that's been running through the conference is to acknowledge that this is in human control. It's not like it's not a wild stallion that's running the wilds of America without any rancher in control of the stirrup, So when you say that it's too late to switch it off, how hard is it to switch off the like buttons and the notifications and this attention kidnapping that's happening?
Yeah, I mean...
you used a very, for me it really stuck in my head, you used a powerful phrase. You said, is it possible to turn the virality economy back to the knowledge economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you can put this on a spectrum of highly viral, dangerous information that is emotional, that is lacking context, that spreads wildly, that includes rumor, gossip, the things that make us act very terribly in society. There's this whole body of fast information that spreads that way on viral networks like this, and you can put that on a spectrum all the way over to good information, which is highly validated information, right? So information that has gone through a number of steps through which it has been professionally vetted or unprofessionally vetted, but vetted nonetheless, right? So systems of academia, journalism, Wikipedia. These are all systems that operate more like knowledge networks versus viral networks, right? And so a viral network is something in which it's the closest the fastest possible share, the quickest possible emotional contagion between individuals, between individual nodes, versus a knowledge network, which slows things down before it reaches its final goal. There's some friction in place that reaches towards its final goal. And I think you can put that on a spectrum, right? So we need to make social media operate more like a knowledge network, more like the journalistic institutions that we've relied upon for the last century, more like, you know, academia and Wikipedia. And we can do that with some design changes, but it is a concerted effort that needs to be done. Yeah.
So, Tobias, just again, when you were speaking of this, you know, that viral networks behave a certain way in a knowledge economy, knowledge slows it down, you know, it allows you to ratify something. But again, I just want to put that this technology can't exist like it's not existing by itself. There's a crazy statistic that viral news spreads 6 times faster. You know, or really hate speech or extreme right-wing views moves much faster than say, you know, center perspectives. So again, I wanted to ask you, I'm not making you the custodian of all of this, it's just that because you've researched it.
It's all good. I wrote the book, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That when you were speaking to people from within the industry, can an algorithm push contagious emotion by itself? Isn't an algorithm by its very name coded by somebody? So when you were researching this, would you at least say that there are particular coders that are coding algorithms to push contagious emotions more than reasonable opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm not trying to, apologize for any of the decisions that were made at these companies. I never worked at a social media company, fortunately, but I had a lot of friends that were very early at these companies. You know, when you abstract information in humans into a layer of a dashboard, for instance, right, and you can see what types of changes to an algorithm will increase net engagement and time on site, then you know, if you're far enough away from that and you're only seeing the number go up, right? Then it makes a lot of sense. Like you're not actually seeing, you know, maybe the hate speech or the borderline content or the, you know, you're not seeing the conspiracy theories, that kind of thing, that are actually embodying that graph up to the right, right? You don't actually have tangible information. A lot of the early decisions that went into these platforms just really didn't account for that at all. And unfortunately, there's a carve-out. Fortunately or unfortunately, there's a carve-out in US law, which is Section CDA 230, which was passed in the 90s. It's the law that created the internet, which basically removes all liability for platforms, for online platforms, for the content that they post on there. And in general, it was a necessary law for making the internet what it is and making it viable for these platforms to work. But it means today, when they have this tremendous amount of power, they actually have no liability, really, for what they do. And that's the problem. That law does need to be updated for the modern time, for the modern moment, because it is a real problem for our collective understanding of the world. Yeah.
Tobias, again, you said something which is really, I think, very profound. You know, you said that a coder who's changing the algorithm and seeing a spike and a graph, so, you know, the cash registers are ringing, his career is going up, but is very separated from young students or young people who are addicted, their self-esteem, their self-harm, relationships are breaking down, society is breaking down, basis this graph going up, but it's very separated, and that's the question I was asking Mr. Halevi as well, you know, that this gamification of war, autonomous weapons of war, where you can sit in a control room thousands of kilometers away from Afghanistan or Syria or Gaza, and you press a button, a bomb falls. You have no sort of, individuality to what, there's a complete, you use the word distance from your actions. So I think that's a very important thing to just hold on to, when we are talking. It's maybe not evil, but not intended evil, but you're completely cut off from the consequences of your action, So here I just wanted to again bring in, ask you, Asa Raskin, who's from, works with Tristan in the, I think it's called Center for Response.
Humane Tech.
Sorry, Humane
the
Technology.
Center for Humane Technology,
The reason I bring him up is because I think he invented the scroll.
The infinite scroll,
The infinite scroll. I just want to place with the audience, this is how innocuous it is, Here's a man who just came up with the idea of the infinite scroll. And I think Brian Acton came up with WhatsApp, they've all become people. It's a bit like an Oppenheimer moment for all of these people who said, I invented the scroll, I destroyed society. I invented the like button, I destroyed society. I invented XYZ, really innocuous things. And now he's become actually a whistleblower, who's really trying to stop this in technology. So again, I'm asking you the question that, would you tell us a little bit about, did you speak to people within Silicon Valley while doing this book? And what's the thinking within? I'm not saying this started out as a desire for, because Asa Raskin is by no means someone who intends evil. He came up with this idea, but when he saw the consequences, he moved out, What about those who are within Silicon Valley now?
Yeah, that is a tough one because there's a lot of money to be made in in designing new tools that capture attention. Just coming back to the specific question of distance or abstraction, a lot of these problems are, I think, solved by bringing people closer to the real human experience, right? So what social media has done is it has put an abstraction layer between us and the rest of society that is gamified, it is highly addictive, highly emotional, and very problematic, right? Very problematic for how we understand each other. I think I'm hopeful that there are new technologies in the very near future. Do you guys remember Clubhouse? Did you ever use that?
Yeah.
Very briefly during the pandemic, it was this very popular app that everyone was at home, so it was a live voice app in which you'd have live conversations with other people. It didn't have nearly the same levels of toxicity, outrage, and highly gamified communication, right? Partially because it didn't have any of these specific tools, but also because you were hearing the voice of another person in real time. And it's very difficult to be emotionally toxic with another person if you are hearing them in real time, right? If I offend you, right, and there's not, if in real life, I can see the hurt in your face, right? I can hear the suffering in your voice, right? If I'm saying something that's mean, right? But when we push so many of our interactions through this medium of text, we are actually abstracting out another human into this profile picture, which may or may not even feel like a real human to us, and they become an easy target for some of our worst emotional impulses. And so I'm hopeful that this next layer of technology that we're building, with various tools to increase the fidelity of our conversations, right? So, like I think VR and live conversations as intermediated and empowered by new tools can actually help solve a lot of these problems by giving us more fidelity in our interpersonal relationships, more empathy in the moment as we're speaking.
Two things I didn't understand. You just said VR and the new technologies we've been discussing, AI is being rushed out the same way that social media was rushed out. So I'm not very hopeful that any of these are going to be mitigated by that. I think it's in Europe that they've now made it law that you have to know the data set that's going into AI before you can deploy it. It has to be audited, it has to be sort of publicly available before this. And Sam Altman, for all this altruistic conversation coming out of the Valley, Sam Altman said that we'll try and oblige. If we can't, we'll just pull out of Europe rather than, live by the principle of what's being put out. So I won't go down that path, but you said the new technology is coming. You mentioned VR. So again, I'm surprised. One thing we haven't done at all this time is virtual reality, except having Jaron Lanier there. But as we're speaking, Apple has put out its new generation VR. And Piyush, from Google was saying he wore it. I'm sure a lot of people here have already bought it. And it's a whole other level of virtual living.
Intimacy,
that you can beam yourself into Yosemite Park. You're surrounded by redwoods. I can imagine the complete pleasure of that. But that's again, it's pretty bewildering. It's just blurring the lines of real and virtual. So why did you say that these new technologies are going to help this?
It's a hope that I have that as we increase the fidelity of our information exchange, then we actually get to a point of more kind of intimate human empathy that is possible for us. I don't think that's going to solve the most present problems with social media, but I do think that. So you spoke about AI just briefly, without going too far down that rabbit hole, but the principal harms of AI I would say 80% of them at least will come to society through social media, right? Through the deep fakes being passed off as real news, through these synthetic personalities pretending to be real humans. So fixing social media is a key piece of safely deploying AI in society right now. And currently, we're not up to the task. I'm hopeful that we will get there very soon. But a big part of that is making sure that we have real humans online and that there's verifiable human identity online. Because you can imagine, right, in the very near future, being able to spin up 1,000 different fake humans to pollute the discourse and offer up a whole new kind of perceived consensus around an issue that might not have any real support from real humans at all. And that's a real problem for our collective understanding and debate.
You know, we were talking about these cultures, different countries having different cultures. You're from America. Help us understand this. This is like a very localized problem. You know, there's only 1 or 2 companies that own all the social media networks that we're all using. How difficult is it to stop this? You know, how can it be that an entire world's social collective and psychological collective is being harmed by a phenomenon, and everyone is helpless in the face of that? You know, how can it be? It's a little bit like bewildering for Indians to understand why there can be constant shootouts in America and that's not turned off.
Right.
And here there are 2 companies that the American government could very well regulate and it doesn't. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, so I mean, Congress in general in my country right now is very dysfunctional, as you might know. There's a lot.
Created by social media in the first
yes,
place.
exactly. Yeah, there's a small group of people in our Congress that are basically locking down any real debate until after the election. We'll see what happens after that. But particularly social media legislation actually does have pretty broad bipartisan support right now, surprisingly. And Congress has become better at understanding these issues. They have a lot of very smart people that are helping them research these issues, a lot of very smart people that have testified in front of Congress about some of these issues. And I'm actually optimistic about a couple of pieces of legislation that are being worked on right now. One in particular called PATA, which is the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act. If that goes through, I think that could actually be a really dramatic shift and change. What it basically does is it allows for government and civil society to have access to the raw feed at these various companies, right? So it's not opening up the hood of the algorithm and seeing the way the algorithm works, but it's essentially plugging into the tailpipe of the algorithm and seeing what it's spewing out, right? And the thing is, a lot of these companies actually know what the harms are. They've done as Frances Haugen found, they've done a tremendous amount of research onto the harms to different parties, right? From teen girls, suicide, and all these different issues. They actually know a lot of these issues, what they are. So I think as soon as you have some level of transparency, big word, but transparency into the outputs of these tools, then very quickly these companies will clean up their act internally, right? Because they know what many of the problems are, so they will keep these government regulators from being able to see that by making sure that they clean it up before that comes through. So I'm actually hopeful that this particular piece of legislation might actually really dramatically improve social media, because a lot of the algorithmic harms right now are hidden to us, right? As Tristan Harris says, it's like the world's biggest crime scene that is only that is being locked off by these various companies, right? They have all the data and all of the harms internally, right? So if we have some transparency, I think we can actually make a huge difference in solving these problems.
Tobias, I'm just surprised, and this one I'm asking you personally, that you're just saying some of the most dramatic and very, very important things, and then just stopping a little shy of calling a spade, you know? You just said the companies have reports. They know this is creating suicide. They know it's creating mental health problems. They know the crazy impacts this is happening. They're sitting on those reports and resisting government regulation, and you say this is not evil. Why?
Wow. Again, I'm not I'm defending these companies. I am just very aware of how, again, this process of abstraction when you're inside of these companies can create a system, a whole full functioning system of deferred responsibility And that's what I think is happening right now, is that you know, everyone can kind of point to someone else and say, oh, it's their responsibility, and this isn't actually our responsibility. And like I will say, I think internally they have tried very hard to mitigate a lot of the worst content on these platforms. So Facebook, for instance, compared to what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, is doing a much, much better job. Their trust and safety teams, these are some of the heroes of our world, and they are hidden from view, and they are keeping some of the worst things on the internet from our eyes and the eyes of our children, right? And they're just toiling in the darkness, seeing some of the most horrific stuff on a regular basis and trying to keep it out of the commons, right? And this is a tragedy of the commons in many ways, and it does require people to help fix these issues. But so I don't think they're evil, but I think they have a kind of a wicked problem on their hands, and they do need to work on it, yeah, and fix it.
This sounds a little bit like the drug lords that don't take drugs, you know? Because I've heard that a lot of the Silicon Valley founders of these companies don't allow their children to use all of this, but they're perfectly fine pushing out the cocaine elsewhere, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not going to stop short of saying this is conscious action. I'm not talking about the employees of these companies.
Yeah.
It's not possible that some companies can create AI, have trillion-dollar investments, create a completely new technology shaping the world, and then be so helpless in the face of pushing off, you know, switching off particular aspects of a technology that is knowingly doing harm.
Yeah.
I'd like to call a spade as a journalist. I don't see this as such a gigantic problem.
Well, let me put it in a different way, all right? So, this was a couple of years ago, and the actual features may have changed since this, but a few years ago there's a highly competitive market, right? So a highly competitive market. So just a couple of years ago, TikTok was not on the map domestically in the United States, right? It was not like a big platform. They have a highly addictive algorithm, like one of the best algorithms in the world for keeping your attention on site, right? So if Facebook and Twitter/X decided not to use a highly addictive algorithm, then they lose market share right away, right, to their competitor, TikTok or Facebook. And you know, attention is zero-sum. We only have a limited amount of it during the day. And the market incentives for these companies are tremendous, right? And that doesn't give them, you know, it doesn't allow for abdication and moral responsibility for these issues, but it's a highly competitive market, and it is changing very rapidly, right? So if it's the difference between keeping their company profitable and competitive versus, you know, turning off some of these addictive measures, the market is telling them what to do, right, actively, right? And this is why I think we really do need government regulation to come in and help them corral and fix actively many of these harms.
I think that's why we were using the word constitution for technology, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs here. But to also speak of the market as something that exists outside of human beings is a bit of an old construct. You know, this is now not just about wealth and you know, just stock markets. You're talking about these companies having a lot of political power, a lot of social power, a lot of civilizational power. That means that these are really technological countries, and they do need to have some other value system rather than just the market, you know, because it's not just a stock market issue here, it's many things. And so that's the note I'd like to end on. Both America and India are going into a major election. Your book says that these things have destroyed democracy. Mustafa Sulaiman, from which AI, you know, DeepMind, he literally said, let's leave everything else in the short term. It has to be regulated that AI cannot be used in politics. He's saying that categorically. You've said it's broken democracies. Do share with us an analysis of that, and we'll end on that note.
On what I think about democracy?
No, why it's been destroying democracy.
Why it's destroying democracy, yeah. So democracy is a fairly straightforward system. It's a very messy system, but it's a fairly straightforward system in that we see a problem collectively, right? If you just kind of get down to first principles of democracy, you see a problem collectively as a group of people. You get angry about that problem, and you try to solve that problem. You vote for someone into power to try to solve that problem. And collectively, that was kind of the whole point, right? Is to collectively try to address issues. Core to that is people being accurately capable of evaluating the issue without too much emotional intensity. And I mean that in a way that, like, most of us, when we see something that's broken in the world, will get upset about it. And if we're too upset, like, our first reaction is oftentimes not the best reaction to solving that problem. So I think and this is a Madisonian thing from back in the day. James Madison, in the United States Constitution, one of the framers, he wrote that he felt like you needed a system to basically allow for outrages to cool down before you could legislate against them. Because if the system's running too hot and people are too angry, then they will actually over-legislate, and they will solve the wrong problem, or they'll come up with a dumb solution to solving the problem. And in general, having too much emotionality in that process was actually really bad for democracy, right? So I think that it's very plausible that what's happening with our democracies right now is that we've increased the kind of clock speed and the heat of these systems operating. And we've, at the same time, that has contributed to a lot of the mis and disinformation that is present. And if we're confused as to what the problems actually are, or we're overly upset about what those problems are, then we're going to legislate the wrong things, and we're going to vote the wrong people into power, and that's going to undermine our whole system. And so I think that's that's the general frame here from a systems-wide perspective of what social media has been doing. And core to that is really making sure that we're accurate and that we have good enough information to move, as Thomas Friedman said earlier, shared trust in what is real to move forward together.
Thank you very much, Tobias. That was an amazing analysis and very, very powerful takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.